Come children, gather round. Let Grandad Brunkard tell you about a time when it was nearly impossible to get Brian May's tone. About the time that I started learning guitar. The Guild guitar, the original one, was out a few years. Wasn't really available. I think there was only a couple of hundred of them built and they were extraordinarily expensive. Then when I was a little bit more impressionable, they came out with another one which was similarly prohibitive and completely unobtainable. In this time, in 2024, it is epically easier to try and get Brian May's sound, and it all starts with the guitar. Now, one word of warning though, and a little bit of a history lesson. A very long time ago, in the earlier part of this century, Burns came out with the first mass production version of Brian May's guitar that was reasonably accurate, and I had one, but I didn't sound like Brian May. And this is the important note here, that if you want to sound like Brian May, you have to get into the music and practice and, learn the tricks of vibrato and bending and all that type of fun stuff, because that's really where the vast majority of the sound comes from. But the other part for this, of course, the technology after the guitar. The guitar is a huge part of Brian's sound, but the true essence of it after that is a treble booster knocking the life out of a Vox AC30 normal channel until it is just screaming. And I covered this a million times before, and there's going to be lots of different ways to get that nowadays that I'll look at in the next video. But today we'll just talk about the guitar, because the guitar is also extremely important. It also helps you look a bit like Brian May. Anyway, let's have a little look. This is a Brian May Guitars Red Special. Now, this guitar has been reviewed extensively since it came out, and there's an awful tendency on YouTube for videos to go, oh, is it still good in 2024? You don't really need to do that with guitars. If it was good in 2020, it was good in 2024. It's always good. But I'm not really going to review that. I'm just going to introduce you as to what to expect if you get one of these amazing instruments, because they are amazing, because they're extraordinarily cheap. If you want to get to a nice hand-built guitar, we'll look at that later, if you got away with €5,000 spend, £5,000, you would be doing very, very well. To get a super accurate copy of Brian May's guitar is prohibitive. These are not prohibitive, and they're very easily got as well, with no wait times to get them. And there's a buoyant second-hand market for them too. Plus, of course, they come in a range of different colours if you don't want to look quite like Brian May. So I'll just talk a little bit about it. So just a couple of little things. It is a mass production guitar, so it's not going to be the same as Brian's guitar, because there's been compromises made to make it cheap, and they're fair compromises. And for 90% of people, the first day you get this, and if you had something that's doing the Vox and treble booster sound, you won't really notice those differences. Obviously, I'm going to point them out because I want to show you what the journey looks like, because as you get used to playing this, you'll find that there's things you can do just to improve things a little bit, and we'll look at all of those. So fit and finish, all of that, it's fantastic. It's a great instrument. It's quality, made in Korea, where a lot of the best guitars are made these days, and a few compromises. So what are the compromises? The materials are different. Brian's is made out of blackboard with the infamous piece of fireplace through the middle, the bit of oak, and those type of woods just aren't here. There is a lot of lovely mahogany in it, I believe, and I think actually there's some basswood as well. It doesn't really matter, okay? The most important things where the cost savings are, that you should be aware of, are the Trem. The Trem is modelled after more like a Stratocaster type of Trem, where the counter springs are in the back of the guitar. This is actually kind of a big difference. This Trem works really well, and it's coupled with, when it's coupled with a good setup, but it also has locking tuners as standard, so it does work in a way that keeps it in tune, and you can do a lot of those Brian tricks like those lovely sort of sweet arpeggiated chords. That'll all come out of this guitar. There's no issue with that. There is a compromise with the Trem. Because it is a Strat Trem, it has the limits of a Strat Trem. So for example, if you do a compound bend, so that's like if I fret a note and bend a note, or if I bend two notes, which is sort of common enough in Brian's work. When you bend one note, the other note will be pulled up in pitch as the bridge is pulled by the bend. Now you can kind of fix that a little bit by putting more springs in your guitar, and this guitar has a full complement of springs. So this Trem is a very stiff Trem, and it only goes down, but it means that it just keeps those notes in tune when you're bending. After that, the pickups they're reasonably fine. They actually sound quite good. If I play some chords here, and a bit of lead, and that's with those two pickups in series. Sounds great. Sounds like Brian May, and as you heard, the clean is all there. Now, where they do have a little bit of a problem, well, not a problem, it's just not quite as you'd expect Brian's guitar to sound, is when you do the out of phase settings. And when you get these guitars, it's worth playing with the heights of both of these pickups, and generally get them reasonably high, or as high as you can tolerate, because that will get you sort of a better sort of Bohemian Rhapsody sound. So I'll just play a bit of Bohemian Rhapsody for the 10,000th time on this channel. So it's a reasonable approximation of that sound. It's not quite like I'd expect the original to sound, but it does a good job. So if you're, you know, not a nerd like me or other people, you know, this is probably going to do you. Now, as you get more into the sound of Brian May, you'll find that there's a few things that you might want to improve, and I'm going to look at those in the next instrument. Before I hop off it, the very first thing that you can do that's a very cheap mod with this guitar is the volume pot. Now, it comes with a 500 ohm one as standard. The one in Brian's guitar is actually a lot lower in value. It's a 220 one. So if you had a 220 pot or a 250 pot in here, you'll find it just a bit easier to get the clean tones, because they are a very distinctive sound, and they're actually quite hard to get with the range of the volume knob normally. So good to replace that, and it costs nearly nothing. So this is a great instrument to start on. It'll do most people, but when you want to take it to a next level, what's great about this guitar is it's a platform guitar. In other words, you can change things in it that'll make a huge difference, and that way you can enter this at any price point that's appropriate to you and your own budget. So let's change it into another one of these that has some of those mods applied to it and see what it sounds like and what it does. Shazam. And we're back. So regular subscribers or long-term subscribers might recognize this guitar, because this is a guitar that is in most of my Brian May videos, and it's the one that I had as my main guitar on stage with the tribute band I work with for most of the time we've been gigging. And it's a lot different probably already to your eye. You can see straight away that the tremolo, it's a bit more like Brian's, and obviously I have some black switches and black hardware on it that should make it look a little bit more like the Guild from 1984. Not quite though, but just a little bit closer. Now, if you have a BMG and you want to bring it up a level, the very next thing after the volume pot that you might want to look at are these, the pickups. Now, as you heard in the last video, the pickups that come with the BMG do a reasonably good job, but when you change these, you can get a lot closer with some of the sounds. Now, I'll just talk a little bit about the background of the pickups, and if you want more insight in this, check out the Red Special Guitar podcast, and there's an interview with Aid from Edison, who made the pickups in Brian May's backup guitars, and it's actually, you know, the most riveting 1 hour you'll spend listening to someone talking about magnets and copper, because basically when Burns were making the Trisonics back in the late 60s, there was quite a lot of variety and variance across the range. Even though they were marketed the same and they looked the same, you know, you could get a different sound from a different set of pickups depending on who built it and when. So the pickups in Brian's guitar are kind of unique, and he doesn't make them available for people to measure them or to take them apart. But there is a book about the Red Special where you can see that he had sealed them with a type of glue, and you can see that some of them have been have had their polarity changed and a couple of tricks like that. But overall, the fact that Brian May has copies of his guitar with pickups from Aid meant that there was a baseline that was publicly available for people to make other pickups that were similarly rated, and these are Yonderbosks. Now, I've talked about Yonderbosks at length in all my videos, and I will continue to shout the praises of Yonderbosk, because a lot of my equipment comes from Matt, a lot of the stuff that I rely on, like the pickups and the treble boosters that I use, and he is the #1 Brian May aficionado electronics person that I can think of, other than the guys that actually work for Brian May. Now, before I get into too much of a gushing thing, these pickups that he has made, the Yonderbosk Sovereigns, their baseline is the Edison pickups that Brian uses himself, so they're quite close. So let's just do a quick comparison. I'm going to just flip this into Bohemian Rhapsody again for the 10,001st time. I'm going to play it again, and what I might do is I might just put the two guitars beside each other so you can hear the difference. So straight away, I don't know if you can hear it, the Yonderbosks have a kind of a mellower top end, and there's a bit more compression on them, which is really what that sound is all about. So it still cuts through the mix like it should, but it's not overly bright, which is very important. This was a huge boon to me, but as well as that, the more traditional meat and potato sound, if you like, of these two pickups and phase sounds very nice and rounded on the top end, and the bass emphasis is in the right spot. So they're really the next best upgrade that you can make to one of these guitars. Now, in addition to Yonderbosk, there are other makers. There's B&M, as used in the Raymond guitars. There's also KZ, who make them in Japan. I haven't heard those ones yet. And there's Marco Ferrari in Italy. And these are all great copies as well. I always talk about the Yonderbosk ones because I have these and I know what they sound like and how they work, and I know that they work well. But I've tried out the B&M ones and the Marco Ferrari ones, and they're fantastic as well. Next, tremolo. So this one is a bit of a funny one because Brian May and his dad actually invented the tremolo system that they put into the guitar. And it works on a kind of a knife blade that rocks back and forth. It's such a good design. It's something that should be more popular and used in more production instruments other than the Brian May copies, because it is actually very, very nice. The tuning with it, the stability, it's all fantastic. But even the gliding motion of bringing a note down, it's just such a joy to actually use and perform with. So very hard to communicate that until you've actually tried it, but the feel of this trem is quite good. Plus, of course, your compound bends stay in tune, which is absolutely essential when you're gigging with it. Now, when you have a BMG guitar, you can actually retrofit trem like Brian's, and it's not quite straightforward. There's a bit of work, but the parts are very easily got. Now, there's a couple of manufacturers. This isn't one of Woody Thomas from Aura's Conversions kit. This is, actually, I don't know where this one came from at all. It's actually quite old, but Aura's Conversions, Woody Thomas makes an amazing set, and I put those into a couple of guitars that I've sold on. And compared to my very expensive guitar, they compare very favorably. They're a really, really quality trem. There's a bit of work putting one into the guitar because the springs live here, and on a BMG guitar, this is just a decorative plate. But when you install the Brian May trem, you need to do a bit of a routing job to get the springs and the trem block into that position. And there's a bit of routing to go through the length of the body as well, just to make sure it's all spick and span and correct and balanced right. If you go with Woody and Aura's Conversions, if you're based in the USA, he has a great shop where he actually does those conversions himself. But he also has a network of luthiers that are familiar with the process around the world. And even if your luthier doesn't feature on that list, Woody's been very helpful, particularly with the ones local to me that helped me with this, in instructing them on how to put this thing in. So this is really next level stuff, and this did me for a long time. And I'll talk about the Deluxe model next, and we'll just try comparison. But if you're happy with the neck on your BMG and you know, you've got the pickups in and you got the trem done, that's really it. You're pretty much there in terms of Brian May's guitar. And you know, a lot of younger people sort of wonder, like, oh, if I have a 20 grand instrument or a 30 grand instrument, oh, I'll be closer or whatever. It's not really where you need to focus your work. I mean, it's no use having a 10 grand guitar and you're plugging it into a little Gorilla amp. It's about having a good chain and good technique and good sort of attitude to the music, and those things will serve you better than dropping huge money on a handmade guitar. That said, having a handmade guitar is absolutely awesome, and I'm going to show you why in the next guitar. So Shazam again. Okay, so this is my KZ guitar, and this is a hand-built copy of Brian May's Red Special. Now, like I just said, it's not something that's absolutely necessary, but I absolutely love having one of these. But one thing you kind of have to be careful of, and one thing I noticed is just sometimes when we get older and we have nicer instruments, we get very snobby about other instruments. There's no sense in that anymore. The previous two guitars I showed you are absolutely fantastic, and I did plenty of gigs with them and survived and thrived, as a matter of fact. However, it's absolutely a delight to have this because it is kind of next level in its own way. But let me explain why. Because the Burns and the Brian May guitar are production instruments, one of the other compromises I didn't talk about is that the neck isn't the same as Brian's. Now, for whatever reason, Brian's neck on his guitar is huge. It is a veritable cricket bat and this sort of copies that. It's not very easy for me to show to you. I don't know if you can get a sense of it there from that long shot, but it's quite thick. And that's not for everybody, but I actually think it's actually very useful for playing his stuff because, you know, he's played that guitar on everything that you've heard, and it makes perfect sense that it's his voice as well. So the limitations of it, or the shape of it, has dictated how he plays. And I find with a wider neck, doing long, slow bends and wide vibrato just makes more sense. So yeah, no, I mean, look, you've heard this thing before, you don't need a demo of it, but it does actually, it is nice having the fat neck. Plus, the appointments of having a nice guitar, if you play a lot, you will feel them. You'll feel that the neck is always in the right place at the right time. The frets are, you know, they make sense. Everything just seems to fit together. So it's very hard to kind of explain that. The problem with a hand-built guitar really is the cost, but even that has become sort of less of a problem. Now, there's a couple of options. Brian May guitars make a Super, which is a more premium version of the guitar that has the wide neck and a couple of other things. I haven't seen the more recent ones in real life yet because they changed manufacturers a few times. So the guys that built this guitar for me, KZ, would have built the Supers for a while. You know, based on my experience with this, I suspect that they're perhaps one of the best ones, but there have been other manufacturers. The only issue with the Super from Brian May is that if you actually buy it new, you have to wait 5 years or thereabouts to actually get one. So that can be a kind of an obstacle for people. But luckily, there's a range of luthiers that are making some fantastic instruments, and I've seen some of them in real life. Danson in France, amazing stuff, very popular. A bit of a waiting list as well because he's so popular. Raymond in Spain, absolutely beautiful instruments. We got to see some of them at one of the Red Special meetups recently, and lovely guy and making really quality stuff. And there's Belbin Guitars in the UK, and Ben Belbin is making just really lovely stuff. And, you know, he's just sort of, he's got a very sympathetic ear to the kind of the nuances that guitarists ask for, so he'll take on a lot of customization onto the design as well. So there's actually loads of people making them, and they're making them well. And there's a lot of people that have just built their own at home, which is also a legitimate option if you're able to do things like that. Fortunately, I'm not. These are girly musician hands and don't have the skills. But if you are kind of woodwork minded, it's something that you can look into. But for all of these type of things, when you're going into sort of the deep end of all of this, there's one place on the internet which I'd recommend that you have a look at. So if you're building, or if you want to find out about builders, go to Facebook and search for Red Special Forum, and I'll try link it in the description below. But this group has literally the creme de la creme of people that are interested in this guitar, and you'll get a lot of advice on how to build it or how to buy one, and you might even find one for sale there. But also you'll see me and other people sort of pontificating about things like the sound and how to get the tone. So I hope that answers the question about the guitar. You know, as I was keen to make clear at the start that people obsess about the quality of instruments, blah, 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 blah. The mass production stuff is great. Don't be worrying about it. Just get one of those. And if you need to tweak it, change the pickups. If you really want the trem, you can change the trem. There's options to cover all of this. The one thing I didn't talk about was the sixpence. I have talked about it in videos previously. Very easy to get these. I remember when I put up something on YouTube Shorts that people were like, oh yeah, an English sixpence, you know, as if I was needing to find hen's teeth to be able to play the guitar. Go to eBay and search for them. You'll find that you can get a bag of them for less than the cost of a plectrum. Actually, they're a fraction of the cost of an actual plectrum these days. So they're very easily got. And that'll get you started. In the next video, I'm going to look at solutions to use at home to be able to get the rest of the tone. Now, spoiler alert, you've seen most of them in the videos I have done previously, but there are some nice cheap gateway ways of digitally creating Brian May sound. There's a new one in particular I want to talk about, which is the Tone X1 pedal. But also, there's your mobile phone, your iPad, your computer. These are all things that are useful, and there's plenty sort of one box devices that you can look at. I'm going to try and cover as much of them and show what the various benefits of each are. So if you haven't subscribed and you want to catch that video, please subscribe, hit the alert button, all that kind of stuff, and then you'll see that one pop up in your feed. Otherwise, if there's any questions, post them below and I'll do my best to answer them. Take care, folks.